Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. We start a news bulletin from the US President Donald Trump, who has appreciated Pakistan's role against terrorism. Addressing a gathering in India's Ahmedabad city, Trump said Washington has very good relations with Islamabad. Due to security concerns, the US President addressed the crowd from behind a bulletproof glass enclosure. Trump said India has an important role to play for peace and stability in the region. The president said he hopes for reduced tensions in future for all South Asian nations.
Our relationship with Pakistan is a very good one. Thanks to these efforts, we are beginning to see signs of big progress with Pakistan, and we are hopeful for reduced tensions, greater stability, and the future of harmony for all of the nations of South Asia. India has an important leadership role to play in shaping a better future as you take on greater responsibility for solving problems and promoting peace throughout this incredible region.
Amnesty International has criticized the United States and India for discrimination and hostility against refugees and asylum seekers. In a statement, the UK-based human rights group said anti-Muslim sentiment is prevalent in US and Indian leaders' policies. The statement coincides with US President Donald Trump's visit to India, where anger is growing against the controversial Citizenship Act. Clashes have broken out in New Delhi during protests against the Citizenship Act ahead of Trump's visit to the capital. Police fired tear gas and smoke grenades to disperse the angry protesters who are demanding the law to be revoked immediately. Demonstrations against Trump and Modi are also underway in several other states. They chanted slogans against the two leaders and held placards reading "Fascist Trump, go back." Malaysia's Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad has sent his resignation to the king, and in a statement, Mahathir's Bersatu party said the leader has also quit the party as the chairman. The Home Minister said the Bersatu party has left the ruling coalition as well. The fate of Malaysia's ruling coalition has been in doubt after the surprise weekend talks between it and opposition groups on forming a new government. The new government would exclude Mahathir's anointed successor, Anwar Ibrahim. It was not immediately clear if Mahathir could form another government with the support of the other parties. Ibrahim had accused his party of plotting to form a new government with the United Malays National Organization. The tussle between old rivals Mahathir and Anwar has shaped Malaysian politics for decades. Tension has persisted despite their alliance to win the country's 2018 elections. For more on this, we are joined by James Dorsey, political analyst from Singapore. Thank you for joining us. Malaysian Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad has resigned not only as the Prime Minister, but also from the chairmanship of his party. How far out of the race to form a new government does this put him? How do you see the situation?
Well, I think the next several hours may tell us so. The former Prime Minister Mahathir is scheduled to meet with the King again tonight. The speculation is that his party will be forming a coalition with another political party, possibly UMNO, the party that was once led by the former Prime Minister Najib Razak, who's currently on trial on corruption charges.
If no grouping has more than 112 members needed for a parliamentary majority, fresh elections are an option. What are the chances of the fresh polls?
It's possible that it would go to fresh elections, but I think it's more likely that you will see a coalition government emerge from this. Keep in mind that this is not a resignation and a pullout from the government because of differences within the government. It's a strategic move, most likely calculated to disrupt the agreement that Mohamed Mahathir had made initially prior to his election 2 years ago, in which he was going to share power or transfer power after 2 years to his former Deputy Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, with whom he's had a very troubled relationship.
Mr. Dorsey, why does Mahathir want to keep Ibrahim Anwar out of power despite his commitment to share the government, or what was the reason behind it?
The two men have never seen eye to eye, really, and the former Deputy Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has been repeatedly in prison and is again being investigated on sodomy charges that most people would view as having been trumped up. This agreement was made when Mahathir Mohamad decided to run again for elections 2 years ago, and he formed this alliance which led to the release of Anwar Ibrahim from prison.
That was James Dorsey, political analyst from Singapore. Thank you very much for your time. Now moving on, the Israeli military says it has bombed the self-styled Islamic Jihad group in Syria and Gaza, killing 6 fighters. A war monitor confirmed 6 pro-Syrian government fighters were killed in Damascus in overnight airstrikes. The Israeli military said the attack was launched in retaliation for rocket attacks in Israel. The Syrian military said most missiles were destroyed before reaching their targets. Meanwhile, Syrians forced to flee the Russian-backed government assault in the country's northwest say they are living in the wretched conditions. They said the situation is exacerbated by cold winds and freezing temperatures. The latest offensive targeting rebel strongholds in Aleppo and Idlib has uprooted 1 million people, mostly women and children. More in this report.
At a makeshift camp in Azaz, dozens have crowded into tents in an attempt to find shelter from the harsh winter. Families are sleeping outside by roads and in olive groves, burning garbage to stay warm. Some children have died from the cold. The Raf Ahmed said children sick from the cold were taken to the hospital in an ambulance.
It is very cold. A few days ago, it even snowed. The children got sick and we had to take them to hospital in an ambulance. The situation is miserable.
One woman said her tent collapsed under the weight of snow, leaving the family without shelter. She also said the situation is grim.
That tent you see there fell on us when it snowed. It got ripped, so I left it on the ground. We are cold and tired. You can see the situation with your own eyes. The conditions are at their worst.
Meanwhile, the UN Humanitarian Affairs Agency (OCHA) said the crisis has reached a horrifying level. It said more than 300 people, many of them women and children, had been killed in Idlib and Aleppo due to the hostilities since the start of the year.
Moving on, 4 people have been killed and 6 others wounded in 2 separate attacks in Iraq's capital Baghdad and the Diyala province. In a statement, police said unknown attackers killed a traffic police officer as well as a civilian in eastern Baghdad. The statement said a civil servant was killed in Sadr city by armed assailants riding a motorbike. It said 3 other people were wounded by an explosion and armed attacks in the southern sections of the city. Iraq's defense ministry said ISIS killed 1 civilian and wounded 3 security forces in the Diyala province. The militant group has not yet claimed the responsibility for the attack. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has asked Iraq's designated prime minister to protect American troops in the country. In a phone call with Mohammad Alawi, Pompeo called for an end to violence and urgent action to address the demands of the protesters. Pompeo told Alawi that the U.S. supports a strong, sovereign and prosperous Iraq. The Secretary of State emphasized on Baghdad's obligation to protect coalition forces and facilities. Pompeo also asked Alawi to urgently put an end to violence against protesters and to seek justice for those killed. This comes ahead of a parliamentary vote of confidence called by Alawi today. Meanwhile, Iraqi lawmakers schedule a confidence vote for the government of Alawi later this week. In the Iraqi city of Najaf, the grave of slain paramilitary leader Abu Mahdi al-Muhandis has become a magnet for Shia Muslims with grievances against the US. Muhandis was killed in a US drone strike alongside Iran's General Qasem Soleimani earlier last month. Anti-American sentiment has boomed in the region ever since. This report has the details.
The US long considered Muhandis its #1 enemy in Iraq, but Iraqis know him as a hero who saved the country from ISIS.
He is the man who defeated ISIS and he is a hero. May he rest his peace. His death affected the entire Iraqi army and the Hashd forces.
Today, the paramilitary commander's grave is bustling with visitors around the clock.
They come to visit the grave of Abu Mahdi. All days of the week, the visits never stop. Ever since he died and until the 40th day after his death, the number of visitors has been tremendous.
For now, the people at this shrine are the least of Washington's worries. The US is likely more concerned about armed Iraqi factions that have vowed to avenge the assassination of Mohandas. The country hosts 5,200 US troops, and while they haven't come under attack from within Iraq yet, they still have a target on their backs that wasn't there prior to the killing of Mohandas and Qasem Soleimani.
It's time for a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back. In China, 150 people have died in the last 24 hours from the new coronavirus outbreak, raising the death toll to almost 2,600. The National Health Commission says there are 409 more infections, pushing the total past 77,000. Beijing has allocated $14.16 billion to contain and curb the outbreak. More in this report.
The new coronavirus has tested China's resilience like few other things in recent times. But it's becoming a serious issue outside China as it spreads to new countries and threatens to take hold in places it is already present. There are now 1,200 cases spread across at least 30 countries. In South Korea, 161 more cases have appeared, taking their total to 763. The country has raised its disease alert to the highest level.
Especially in Daegu, a large number of confirmed cases have been reported. If we don't block the spread in the Daegu regions in an effective way, there is a high possibility that it would end to a nationwide transmission.
Italy has reported its third death in the outbreak, but the European Union says there is no need for a COVID-19 panic. Speaking to reporters at the G20 summit in Riyadh, EU Finance Minister Paolo Gentiloni said the bloc has full confidence in the Italian authorities.
What I would say on the subject is one, that EU has full confidence on the Italian authorities and on the decisions that they are taking. There is no reason for panic, and there is a need to follow the instruction of public and health authorities.
In the meantime, Turkey, Pakistan and Armenia have closed their borders with Iran after it reported confirmed cases of the virus.
Kuwait, Bahrain and Iraq have confirmed their first novel coronavirus cases. Health ministries in these three countries said all had come from Iran. Kuwait reported 3 infections while Bahrain and Iraq 1. Last week, Kuwait Airways and Iraq Airways suspended flights to Iran, while Saudi Arabia suspended all the travel to Iran. Turkish Airlines have cancelled its flights to 4 Iranian cities and decreased the frequency of flights to Tehran until 27th of February. At Kuwait's request, Iraq has shut its Safwan border crossing with the country to travelers and trade. In Iran, the confirmed death toll climbed by 4 to 12, the highest number of fatalities for any country outside of China. Earlier, the Iranian government denied there had been 50 deaths and pledged transparency. In Italy, officials have cut short the Venice Carnival to control what is now the worst outbreak of the coronavirus in Europe. The authorities in Veneto region said the event will end 2 days earlier than planned. Italy has imposed quarantine restrictions in 2 northern hotspot regions close to Milan and Venice. Nearly 50,000 people cannot enter or leave several towns in Veneto and Lombardy for the next 2 weeks without special permission. Many businesses and schools have suspended activities, while sporting events have also been cancelled. The government says the army is prepared to step in if needed to enforce the perimeter. Italy has reported the highest number of coronavirus cases in Europe at 132, with 3 deaths. Libya's Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj has denounced the shelling of civilian areas and airports in the country, calling rival Khalifa Haftar a war criminal. Speaking at the UN Human Rights Council, Sarraj accused the Libyan National Army commander Haftar of violating human rights in Libya. The Prime Minister said children have lost their right to education because of the shelling and closure of the schools. He said the attackers and anyone who provides weapons to them must be held accountable. Al-Siraj said his government of national accord has shown a readiness to move forward on the path to peace and stability. Leaders of Libya's warring parties, GNA and LNA, are due to hold UN political talks in Geneva on Wednesday. Thirty people have been wounded in a bombing at a rally in support of Ethiopia's Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Police said they have arrested 6 suspects. The authorities said the attack was probably carried out by the Oromo Liberation Army, the armed wing of the Oromo Liberation Front opposition party. The attack happened as Ethiopia's electoral board is preparing for the parliamentary elections scheduled for 29th of August. The formal campaign period will begin in May. Officials say Prime Minister Abiy was not present at the rally. 2 protesters have been killed during police-backed anti-government demonstrations in Haiti's capital of Port-au-Prince. The Defense Ministry says shots were fired during clashes at a carnival, while the army-guarded stage was also torched. Officials said troops fired tear gas and assault rifles at the protesters. The police timed the protest for the first day of the festival to criticize the government's spending priorities. Protesters carried guns, marched from the upscale Delmas neighborhood towards the large Champ de Mars public square. Haitian police have been demanding better working conditions, in particular the right to form a union.
We don't want carnival. Second, we support the police protests who are demanding a union. The lack of security in this country is the fault of President Jovenel Moïse. He uses the army to destroy the police. Various police officers have been wounded by bullets. There is one who died. We say to the people that we need to keep going until the end.
Hundreds of supporters of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange have marched through the streets of Sydney calling for his release. The march came just before the Australian national's extradition hearing opens at London's Woolwich Crown Court. The WikiLeaks founder spent 7 years in Ecuador's embassy in London. Initially, he fled there to avoid extradition to Sweden, where he was accused of rape. He was forced out of the embassy last year and is being held at a high-security prison in London. Assange is wanted by the US on 18 criminal counts of conspiring to hack government computers and violating an espionage law. Australians demanded his release and decried his extradition hearing in London.
This is Julian's homeland, and the government of Australia has a moral responsibility to rescue its citizen from the most notorious political persecution since Dreyfus.
A vast sandstorm from the African Sahara Desert has shrouded Spain's Canary Islands, disrupting over 800 flights. Spain's airport operator ANA cancelled, suspended or diverted all the flights to and from the islands, citing low visibility. A state of alert was issued by the regional government on the weekend, with the residents advised to stay indoors. The sandstorm is visible from space, with satellite images showing it engulfing the islands of the coast of northwest Africa. A French street artist's interpretation of the Mona Lisa, made using 330 Rubik's Cubes, sold for $520,680 at an auction in Paris. Organizers say it was well above a pre-sale estimate of up to $162,000. More in this report.
Invader is an anonymous street artist known for his mosaic tilework featuring pixelated versions of the 1978 Space Invaders video game. The Rubik Mona Lisa was created in 2005 and is the first in Invaders' Rubik Cubism series, in which he recreates well-known works.
You can distinguish it just from the shape. You almost don't need to see the details. You know it's the Mona Lisa simply because of the position, the composition, and that's what's magical. It's not the case with all of Invader's Rubik's works. Some of them are harder to get at.
The sale coincided with the closure of a blockbuster Leonardo da Vinci exhibition at the nearby Louvre Museum, the home of the real Mona Lisa. That show marked the 500th anniversary of the death of the Renaissance master.
mais simplement elles
They both embody their own eras. It's not the place to talk about Da Vinci's art here, but you could go on forever. Invader is in the same vein, someone who embodies his era.
de le dire. Invader, on est un peu dans
Invader, who defines himself as an unidentified free artist, wears a mask and insists on his face being pixelated for rare appearances on camera. He has a large following of fans who use a smartphone app, Flash Invaders, to snap pictures of his mosaics.
In Italy, German designer Philipp Plein has put on a dazzling spectacle as he presented his Fall 2020 collection at Milan Fashion Week. Along with the glittery clothes line, the show also featured some US celebrities dressed in sparkling costumes.
Philipp Plein, known for his over-the-top runways, launched his latest winter collection at Milan Fashion Week. Gold and silver tones dominated the show. Hoodies and latex miniskirts were also a recurrent theme for the show, which saw models walk around a customized fighter jet and speedboat. The designer Pinkett Smith and models wore sparkly jerseys and sweatshirts inspired by Bryant's Los Angeles Lakers number 24 jersey. Plein told proceeds from the sales of the Bryant-inspired tops would be donated to Mamba and Mambacita Sports Foundation. The show also featured a performance by US rapper and singer Tyga.
Stock markets across Europe are trading lower after a surge in novel coronavirus cases across the continent. Investors are on a selling spree as major stocks lose steam. Frankfurt's DAX is trading over 3.5% lower after Lufthansa's stocks fell over 7.5%. CAC 40 in Paris has lost over 3.5% after Air France-KLM shares dived over 7.5%. London's FTSE 100 has lost nearly 3% after EasyJet stocks plummeted over 10%. In Asia, Seoul's Kospi led the losses, closing nearly 4% lower after major airlines took a dip. Hong Kong's Hang Seng and Shanghai Composite lost ground. Meanwhile, international Brent crude oil price has plunged over 3% as global air travel falls amid coronavirus. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus Special.